Somebody gotta stop Montech at this point. They just went too far. This is the Montech King 95 Pro. I know I'm late to the party, but here it is, Montech's latest and greatest case, and yes, it is truly great. In fact, one of the best that I have seen so far. This thing is so stuffed with features, and at the same time it gives you the possibility for so many choices. It's just insane. But Montech also promised a lot. In the end, this is called King, and therefore I expect King features and King durability. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and start at the beginning. There are two different versions of the new King, the Pro and the regular King 95. Now it seems like there are some nuanced differences, but the most obvious one is that the Pro comes pre-filled with Montech AX and RX fans, and the non-Pro simply doesn't. Other than Pro versus non-Pro, you can also choose between black, white, red and this beautiful looking blue color. And beautiful really is a theme that we will be dragging out through half of this review, cause everything about this goddamn thing is so gorgeous, especially the main feature. The curved glass. The immediate eye magnet is of course that 3/4 of the front and the whole side panel is made out of tempered glass. But instead of just having a metal frame separating the two, Montech managed to curve the front panel with the same angle as the base chassis, combining the two in a very seamless way, with only the edge of each glass panel separating the two. It is just beautiful. Other than the obvious selling point, the case's general layout has a lot in common with the style of an O11. We got a front chamber containing all of your main components with nothing underneath nor on top, allowing for a very straight airflow path from the bottom up, out in the top, and an additional side entry. In the back we got a separate compartment for the usual stuff that you don't necessarily want to see, PSU, drives, all of that stuff. But this is not a O11. There is a lot more going on here. As for compatibility, we are pretty well equipped, but not perfect. But before we get there, maybe let's just see how to open this thing up. The side panel is secured using a catching screw, which is nice. And once that one is loose, you can just pop it out and pull it out to the top. The backside is exactly the same thing, but the front one, this one is also secured using the pop connections, but with pop, I mean pop. Getting it off, at least the first time, requires enough force to make me develop a whole new set of PTSD. The last panel would be in the top, which is fairly easy and not that hard to get off, just pop it out to the top. Very simple, not triggering at all for a change. But hey, the front being glass only, I don't see that to be a bad thing, especially as like the first time. You just need to know that getting it off will feel more like breaking than taking out. And now where we are inside the case, let's talk about what you can actually stuff in here, starting with the obvious motherboard, which is very standard, from mini ITX all the way up to very regular ATX. Although Montech seems to think otherwise, I believe the weakest point of the King 95 is the compatibility with air coolers. With up to 175mm high towers, it's okay. I'm not like aware of a cooler which won't fit by default. But for example, if you take an NHD15 with elevated fans because you have like fancy ass RAM, and there you have a limit. But still, 175 isn't necessarily bad, and if I consider that to be the worst part, imagine how the rest of this review will be going. For the GPU, we are practically allowed to do whatever we want, up to 420mm long cards that are up to 70mm deep. So no worries about the NVIDIA Octopus or like that big ass 600-watt connector that we got going here. The only GPU restriction which may arise at some point is if you decide to overload that side intake with a radiator and a bunch of fans. In that case, you will inevitably at some point end up in front of the GPU, limiting it down to 275mm. So if you're planning to do that, keep in mind that you got about 62mm worth of space on that side intake until you start hitting the GPU. And the same for the front. It might not look like it right now, and we will get to the specifics later on, but you can transform the front of the case into like the airflow mode. And if you do so, whatever you will put in the front will therefore be taken off the maximum GPU length. So just take that into consideration. The power supply inside the King 95 Pro or regular goes into the back, into its own compartment. There we got about 240mm worth of power supply length. So basically do whatever you want. And a nice little rubberized resting stand to make it sit comfortably, which also doubles as a great cable stuffing tool. For drives in general, the King 95 or Pro is actually quite amazing. Just above the power supply location we got the cage, which is accessible from outside the case, and there we can fit either two 3.5 inch or three 2.5 inch drives, with the last one sitting on top of the cage. So in theory you could also combine two 3.5 inches and one 2.5 inches sitting on top. Then we also got this whole area of the case. This one serves multiple purposes and we will get to each of them later on, but one of them is that we got another two 2.5 inch drive spots. And because that still wasn't enough, we also got this whole bracket included with the case. This one can be used to mount three 2.5 inch or three 3.5 inch drives. However, it comes with a downside cause it is meant to be mounted in the bottom of the case, where in my case now we have the fans. So you will need to decide between bottom intake or three additional drives. The choice is yours, I know what my choice would be, but the total counter that stands right now is 5 hard drives or 5 3.5 inch drives plus 3 SSDs or just simply 8 SSDs. Which is a lot considering this is still like a mid-tower case which isn't particularly big. The I/O on the King 95 can also score some major points. Separate audio in and out, as well as 2 USB 3.0 Type A's and 1 USB 3.2 Type C. And of course RGB. Of course the King 95 got a lot RGB going. Ignoring the fact that all of the included fans got their own ARGB ring around them going on, we also got a curved ARGB strip going around the fixed part of the front panel. And by using the ARGB button on the I/O panel, we can control this ridiculously oversized ARGB controller and fan hub in the back. This thing is so oversized. It comes with 2 separate SATA power connections. In total, we can hook up to 10 3-pin ARGB or PVM devices, most of which are already pre-filled on the Pro version, as all of the fans are already wired up, and the cable management is also pretty neat, I gotta say. But this still leaves us with 3 ARGB and 4 PVM devices, which is almost perfect because if you would spec out the case, like as much as you can, you could add a potential 5 additional fans, which is just not enough. But I'm not even overreacting here. This thing is the biggest and fattest included fan controller I have ever seen. Ridiculously oversized and so freaking cool to be included in a case. From there we can also forward the signal back to your motherboard using the very regular 3-pin ARGB and PVM connection, and then just shut off the controller and let software or the motherboard do whatever you want it to do instead of Montech's built-in ARGB controller. Now with all of the basics covered, let's talk about some of the specifics, cause this case has... Could you not? Thank you. Because this case is so freaking packed, and starting off with the included stuff. Inside the hard drive cage we will get a prep box filled with all the necessary screws and some velcro strips. Really handy stuff and easy to use thanks to the labels, especially like quality wise. This just feels much better or much more premium than just like a simple bag where you have all the screws in the same bag which contains everything, and it's just annoying. This is great job. But the manual. Considering where Montech is coming from in recent years, this is the type of manual I expect. Everything is explained exactly to the point I expect them to. How to pop off the panels, how to install fans, how to mod the case into airflow mode, everything step by step. They did a great job here. Then we got the secret PSU mounting. The hard drive cage we discussed before actually has a double function, because after removing the 4 necessary screws, it slides out into the case, revealing an additional power supply spot. So yeah, this is actually a dual PSU capable case. Now, I'm not sure about the, let's say, usability, because It's not like a dual motherboard capable case. I guess if you wanted to go completely overboard and distribute the load onto multiple PSUs, well, in theory, Montech isn't stopping you. Cable management. Montech did a fantastic job. All around the case, we got these quite big cable management holes with rubber for protection and just, looking overall good. And then because we got that sidewise intake, which is slightly lower than the motherboard panel, we got that 45-degree angle for the cable holes in the middle. And that paired with some braided cables makes the whole design just look so good. But that's not all, because in the back we also got 3 Velcro strips and this thing, which is actually something that is meant to keep the PSU up. But because it's hollow, you can stuff whatever cable you want in there, which is much more useful than you might believe right now. But it's not like you need to do it, because we got about 100mm worth of cable management space in the back. And in case you did a really crappy job with all of the stuffing, it doesn't really matter, because you can use this whole plate to push all of your cables down and lock them in using 2 screws. And now there is no way in hell that the cables could prevent you from popping in the back panel, which is really handy, really cool, makes stuff so much easier, especially if you wanna, skip over the cable management part, and it's just really great. You just need to make sure that you don't push the cables into the side fence. There you need to look out for. But speaking of which, let's get to the main focus of today's video. Because if Montech did one thing right, it is cooling. And I'm not talking about like a mass of fans. It's like somebody actually cared. By default, we are looking at up to 9 fan spots. 3 in the bottom, preferably intake, 2 on the side, also preferably intake, 3 in the top, as well as a last one in the back for exhaust. So either a total of 9 120mm fans or 6 140s combined with a 120, because even if the side can be fully utilized using 140s, the top and bottom are limited to 2 140s only. So on one hand, this has a lot of fans, but it's actually the quality of execution that shocked me here. The bottom, for example, they are quite well located to blast fresh and cold air right into your GPU, or even a bit in front of it, depending on how long it is. However, the feet of the case give the bottom fans about 3.2 millimeters of space, so plenty of space to not get choked. The metal plate they are installed on is slightly raised up just to give the fans a bit more space to the most giant air filter I have ever seen on a case. That thing just covers the whole freaking case. This is unnaturally big. And actually the case just got so much breathing going on. The area between the glass and the GPU is covered in holes. And so is the complete bottom side of the case. Even the area in the separate compartment. This is completely useless. There is no fan using this space. It's good to have, I guess it won't hurt, but it's like Montech just did it because they could, which is amazing. For the side intake, we get the same treatment because the complete backside of the case is formed with a wave-like pattern with some dust filter behind. The top, I was actually most excited about. I thought that this is like the coolest optical aspect ever, but I quickly had to realize that this is like an optical aspect only. Anyway, even if it looks like the holes are adding like extra exhaust capacity, they kinda just don't. The fans are going to be almost squished to the top panel or the top air filter, which by the way is designed exactly like the right side panel. But because of the position of the fans, there is just literally zero difference or zero benefit to having these holes. They still look really cool and I enjoy having them like aesthetically, but they won't change anything. But what will change a lot is where the fans are mounted to, because by removing the 4 screws in the top, we can unmount the whole thing, making installation outside of the case possible, and hence giving us some extra space to work with the 8-pin EPS or whatever other connector in the top you need to work with. However, this will also lead me to one of the things I believe Montech missed, because this panel is not reversible, which in my opinion is a real shame. Because What you could have done is make sure that this screw is like literally a millimeter further to the front, or simply smaller, and then let the user decide if he wants to sacrifice a bit of space in the top in exchange for lowering the top fans, and this in change would create an actual air path to these holes around the top panel. And that may even have led to slightly lower noise, because fans in general become louder when they are like glued to a filter. Not that they are loud in here, but they would have had a potential benefit. By default, excellent. Simply excellent execution. Everything here can breathe. Not a hot box, fresh air from two angles. But what if there was a third one? Included in the box, Montech provides you with all the necessary stuff to go from the elegant glass mode into turbo mesh mode. Get ready for some of that Bionicles action here. Instead of popping the glass panel back on, you can also use the mesh front panel. Hell yeah! But where does the air come from? Well, the side-mounted fan bracket is actually sitting on a giant hinge. By removing the top and bottom screw, you can release it and pivot it towards the front. But wait, Montech does say in the manual that for this transformation, you are required to remove the most front-bottom fan. But there is an easier way to do it, because you can also push out the complete hinge, because there is actually like a two separate hinges thing going on, so you can very easily just push it to the front. Anyway, you can push it out so much, which in turn allows the bracket to protrude far enough to just pull it out to the top. And then just finish the hinge rotation and push the bracket back in once the hinge is in its final position. And congratulations, you just saved yourself a solid 30 seconds. Anyway, once you're done with this, you have front intake, which, as we all know, is definitely like the best freaking intake that you can have. But there is a small problem though, because if you got the Pro version, like the one we got here, it's kind of a stupid problem. The bottom comes pre-filled with 3 reverse spinning RX 120mm fans. The back got a regular 120mm AX fan, and the side intake, there we got 2 140mm reverse spinning fans. So you are looking at the nice looking side while air is being blasted into your face. But this also means that once we complete the whole rotation thing, we are pulling air out of the case, which is like the worst type of front air that we can have. So no matter how you're looking at it, these need to be replaced with regular spinning fans. But Montech got us covered. So okay, new fan spots, but what about the side intake that we just lost? Well, we didn't. During the rotation, you will also find out what that completely over-engineered metal plate in the back compartment actually serves for. Instead of just flat out losing the side intake, we can use that plate to move the reverse spinning fans onto it, preserving what we previously had whilst getting the benefit of front-facing airflow. Now there are some differences, like the side-mounted intake is sitting much further back to into the second compartment, which isn't necessarily a huge thing, but it will definitely look slightly different than like the out-of-the-box experience. But at the same time, we also won like a huge amount of radiator thickness that you could potentially screw into that thing before you start hitting the GPU. For the new front fans, we are now looking at up to 390mm long GPUs, which is also a whole lot, which is like whatever you want to do, but we also gained another up to 280mm radiator space in return. However, just keep in mind, whatever you attach to the front, subtract that down from the up to 390mm long GPUs. But this is the turbo mesh mode, 3 intake paths, all of which are blasting cool air right into your components. Another thing to keep in mind here is that there is no like dense air filter for the front like you got on the bottom or you got on the side or on the top. All we have is that meshy material in the front. It is pretty meshy, and that's basically it. And don't forget to secure the front fan bracket, because there are little screws in the top that you need to like loosen up to reveal the part that you actually need to screw everything to. I mean, you are not forced to do it, but you don't want that whole hinge to move around once the fan starts to spin very quick. Just do it, better be safe than sorry. But let's now talk about the build we did in this. It was a fantastic experience. Out of all of my Montech cases that I have worked with in the past, this is by far the best thing. It is a king, no matter how you want to look at it. Building in it was so easy. Once you remove both the front and side panel, you have so much room to work with. Because of the dual compartment design, you have so much space in the back. You got so much space once you remove, or if you remove, that hard drive cage. And that whole hinge, that whole plate system in the back helps you with cable management, which is so easy in here, like from the get-go, but this makes stuff even easier. And especially considering how many fans we got going in here. Like, the overall experience is just fantastic, and it looks goddamn beautiful in that blue color. But let's also talk a tiny bit about the temperature. So this is not a hot box. It will perform perfectly fine, like as a general statement. And the build we got here is a 13600K with a Deepcool AK620 Dock Zero on top and a Gainward Phantom RTX 4080. A lot of names, but it is a quite good like gaming build, let's say. For the fans, we wanted to stick to everything what Montech provided us with. Basically, we had the Pro version, so the case was already stuffed to the brink. And all we did was add another 120mm AX fan to the top, because I thought that having two exhausts would be better than just one, considering how many intakes we had. From there, we locked the CPU down to 5.1 GHz on the P cores and 3.9 on the E cores, 1.4 V core, and we were burning about 140 watts using CPU burner from Furmark, and we had Furmark running at 1080p because my little monitor just allows for 1080p. From there, we allowed all the fans to do whatever ASRock tells them to. Like the CPU was auto, GPU was auto, and the case fans were all on auto. From there, we had 81 degrees C on the package and 62 on the GPU, which is a fantastic result. However, by lowering all of the fans down to 50, just to have like a fixed number, all the fans spinning at 50, we were looking at 89 degrees C on the package, and the GPU still at 62, but 89 on the package, which is an amazing temperature considering I was barely hearing those fans. Like 50% on everything is basically nothing. It was really, really quiet. However, something happened that I did not expect. We also removed the front glass panel and replaced it with the mesh panel, for the mesh mode. And then we did the whole turning the side fans, and then replaced the side fans with two additional 140mm, and we repositioned the two originally side reverse spinning fans to the back as a whole, providing us with two additional 140mm intake fans in the front. And to my very surprise, neither the auto setting nor the normalized to 50% fan speed setting changed anything. The temperatures were exactly the same. So this was very, very interesting, or surprising in the very least. I guess once you spec out the system with a more insane CPU that burns 200, maybe 300 watts out of the socket, you will start to see some changes. But like for the, I would even say good gaming build, there is no difference. Having mesh in the front didn't change a thing. It was running exactly the same, nothing changed. So although I believe the mesh panel is good and it's a really cool choice that you got, you need to go very far before you will like measure a difference. I guess I could test it out, but 140 watts running through the socket with a Deepcool cooler, nothing. The case provided enough air in and out to have front fans do nothing. Really interesting, and to keep in mind, if you got like the average build, you can be sure that glass in the front won't change a thing for you. Or at least until you get to much higher burning CPUs. If I wanted to summarize the case, it would be what the actual... This thing is pretty much over-engineered, and I'm shocked that Montech of all things did this. The company was just started a few years ago, or got popular a few years ago with very affordable and ready-to-go stuff, and they managed to evolve into developing this. And so quickly, like it's been like 2 years since we saw the X3, and now we have this. But what about the build quality of this thing? Well, it's freaking fantastic. Everything is rather stiff, nothing wiggles too much, considering how much material there is to keep everything like straight. Because you need to keep in mind that there is nothing in the front here that separates the two once you have the panels removed. And still, then it doesn't wiggle too much, everything is rather stiff. But for me, the beauty really lies in versatility. Sideways mounted fans by default, transform it into side and front if you wanted to, and hinges. This case has probably the most amount of hinges I have ever seen inside a case, and they are actually good. And I don't know, but moving stuff around in the case, or transforming stuff with hinges, just has a sense of quality, especially if they don't produce like weird sounds while moving them. And in here, it's a beautifully executed thing. Now, I will add something at the very end, and I'm not sure if this is like a feature or like a quality issue, but the paint on the case is, in general, is fantastic. I love the blue color, but once you put the top panel on, which is made out of metal, and you put it like every side panel, and once you put it next to the I/O panel, which is the only panel or the only part of a panel made out of plastic, yeah, that's a different shade. But it's not really the shade that bothers me, but the I/O panel looks to me like it's 3D printed. Like even on images on Montech's website, you can see them. Those to me look like 3D printing lines. Something that you will definitely not find on any other part of this case. And it's not like it's bothering me. I'm just unsure how to feel about the difference. But I guess this is up to you to decide, but the color is off from the top or the side or whatever panel to the I/O panel. Even taking that into consideration, I still love the case. It's performed like a champ. It gives you so much possibilities. Curved glass, mesh, fans and radiators all over the place. The floor really is yours. And execution of all hinges, the combined front panel connector, and I could just go on and on for an hour. So many little quirks and gimmicks that Montech did a fantastic job with. And as a whole, I could even say that this is aesthetically, and even for like a versatility standpoint, my favorite case as of now. It may be quite a bit behind things like we saw from Fantex, or Be Quiet, like 420 radiator support or bigger air cooler support. But as for like the size, I can do amazing stuff in here while it looks amazing. And in an all Montech fashion, the price is fantastic. Almost. The baseline version of this thing, so without the fans, goes for around 100 euros here and now, which is a great price for what you will get, or for the design that you will get and performance and everything, but it's a great price. The Pro version, which is the one that we got, will cost you about 50 bucks more. And I am a bit unsure if paying 50 bucks more for like only Montech RX and AX fans is worth it to me. Don't get me wrong, they are okay-ish. We saw them on other cases before, the Sky 2 for example, and they will do a fantastic job for pretty much everything you could wish for, considering how many you will get preloaded with. But me personally, I think I would rather take the baseline version and get myself a triple pack of P12 and P14 ARGBs. And even if this might end up 10, 15 like euros more expensive, like as a whole, the benefit would definitely come in handy in the long run, especially like noise to performance wise. Or whatever other fan. The point is, for 50 euros I can get maybe not more, but better fans. But even with that little personal edition, definitely a recommendation across the line. This has to be one of the most versatile yet beautiful cases without being overcomplicated to build in. The build we did in here was goddamn easy to execute, performed like a champ, and we did not encounter like a single problematic moment. Definitely a recommendation, no matter what you want to build, as long as it's ATX and it doesn't have like a huge air cooler, this thing is definitely worth considering. If not for the performance and versatility, then for the design, because at least that curved glass is just something awesome to look at. A great job Montech pulled off here, and this definitely places Montech on a completely different tier level of case manufacturing for the future. But okay, this was it for Montech and their new King 95 Pro, which, as it turned out, has a fitting name. At this point, a huge thank you to them for sending it over. And on a side note, we also have a Discord server, so if you want to join, the link is down below. And of course, we still have channel memberships, so if you're looking for a good way to sell your stuff on RG Poop emoji, that's a pretty good way to go. Additionally, you can rest assured that the income will not only keep the channel afloat, but will also serve to investigate what that mesh in the top is actually protecting. There has to be something valuable inside there, hidden somewhere deep. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you want to continue, have a look at our take on the Cougar Dual Phase RGB Pro, which also is a case that comes with exchangeable front panels. However, compared to this one, the front panel there is not really, or the mesh panel is not really an option and more a necessity, given how much you win by exchanging it. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.